The Witcher is a fantasy drama Netflix television series starring Henry Cavill, Freya Allan, and Anya Chalotra. The second season, consisting of 8 episodes, was released on December 17, 2021. Warning, there will be some mild spoilers for Season 2. Shortly after Season 1 aired, I was able to get an interview with the Season 1 costume designer Tim Aslam. I'll leave a link to those videos and the full interview in the description below. But let's get to Season 2. Before I get into the full analysis of the costumes, the elephant in the room is that the show replaced the costume designer going into Season 2. Some of the fans blamed Tim for the Nilfgaardian armor and deviating away from the look of the game. I'm not entirely sure what the story is. Some of you suggested that Tim was fired because he botched the costume so badly. But I don't buy that because ultimately, series showrunner Lauren Schmidt-Hissrich is responsible. The buck stops with her. Because it's very common in series television for costume designers to move on after just one season or even after the pilot. We see this all the time. I will say that while many of you hated the armor, I had to add a new list of blocked words in my comments section. The armor never really bothered me so much. And I should mention that if you haven't seen any of my other The Witcher videos, the costumes in the video game are copyrighted and they couldn't be replicated for those looks. The Nilfgaardian armor in Season 2 is okay. A big pet peeve of mine for all fantasy shows is that they rarely have leg armor. It's so common now that designers will dress their armies in contemporary black trousers with Greek-style greaves over top. Since the thighs are the largest muscle in the body, should they not be protected as much as the shins? Now let's get to the rest of the Season 2 costumes. I should mention that I am only a show watcher. I have not read the books or played the game, so my review is based upon that. And as I always say, the show should be able to stand on its own merits. Despite IMDb stating that costume designer Lucinda Wright only worked on the first episode of Season 2, she did take over the reins from Tim Aslam. According to her CV, she's an accomplished British costume designer working mostly in TV. My first impressions of the season were pretty good. I binged the show easily in less than a week. I enjoyed the show itself, and I didn't see any glaring issues with the costumes. I enjoyed the pops of color in the costumes because the color grading in The Witcher is really desaturated and gloomy. And I have some small quibbles and some things that didn't work for me, but as always, these are just my own opinion. One of the most difficult aspects of taking over a design from another designer is creating a design that isn't too jarring from the previous season. One thing I found refreshing is that the costume designer reused many of the costumes from Season 1 in Season 2. Since Season 2 picks up shortly after the Battle of Sodden, many of the characters, including Tissaia, Yennefer, and Fringilla, are in the same costumes. But we also see Tissaia wearing many of her other Season 1 costumes. As well, Stregobor, Mousak, Calanthe, and Pavetta also wear the same Season 1 costume, and I'm sure there are many more. This only makes sense budget-wise since it would be such a waste to chuck those costumes entirely. But while Wright was trying to bridge the gap, in some ways it looked a bit messy trying to merge their two designs. She also appeared to have abandoned some of the Slavic influences we saw in Season 1. So on this front, I don't know that they succeeded. It might have been better to just chuck the entire Season 1 design and start from scratch, or continue with what they had started already. For instance, the quasi-Elizabethan silhouette worn by Fringilla did not work for me at all. The world is largely medieval, with draping silhouettes and long-hanging sleeves, while this gown looks completely out of place. Added to that, it was unflattering on her, with the bodice constructed with princess seams, and it appears that there is no understructure. Now, I can't confirm, but the actor who played Fringilla, sorry that I'm not saying her name because I will likely mess it up, apparently she was pregnant while shooting, so that would have been challenging since there were already so many delays because of COVID. But she looks completely different from Season 1 in my opinion. And then with Jaskier, they dumped his Renaissance silhouette for an 18th century swashbuckler, Puss in Boots look. They wanted to get an hat in for him this season, so they went with this cavalier style. I did like the construction of this Jaime Lannister style coat, but the fabric looks synthetic for some reason and not leather. And while the hair and wigs are not under the costume department, they made some odd choices in my opinion. I did love Fringilla and the elf Dara's hair, and I thought that the wigs on most of the actors looked great, namely Geralt and Ciri. In the season finale, a possessed Ciri sees her mother Pavetta wearing her green gown from season 1 with this long, blonde, tendrilled wig. Her wig was so out of place that I thought that they had recast the actor. Jaskier's hair was also kind of weird. It might be Joe Beatty's hair, but I think that they could have done something much better with it. And while I love Eamon Farron's hair, the actor who plays Cahir, his dirty and disheveled hair looked amazing in the front half of the season. But then they did this weird Liberace teased and sprayed helmet look on him when he challenges Dara. Like, why? However, the most dramatic change in season 2 was with Triss Merigold. In season 1, they didn't wig actor Anna Schaefer, instead opting for her natural brown curly slightly below the shoulder hair. Maybe this irked the fans, or the showrunners had second thoughts, but in season 2, they decided to wig her with long red tresses. Now, not being a book reader or a game fan, I didn't mind her other style, so for me, this just kind of came out of left field. But the one big improvement for me was her costumes. I was never really crazy with any of her looks in season 1, and I was disappointed overall with all of the sorceress costumes worn at Sodden Hill, mostly Yennefer's rope dress. So for me, the best costume in the show hands down is Triss's green velvet sideless gown. It's an amazing cut, and it fits into the world of The Witcher for me. The other costumes that I also liked are those worn by the Witchers themselves, such as Vesemir, Cohen, Gawain, and Kaer Morhen. They're all pretty much in keeping with Geralt himself, lots of studded leather, but the leather manipulations on Lambert, for instance, are really cool. The leather looks like it might come from Delessiano in Italy. They do a lot of leather work for theater and film and created some of the fabric textures for Game of Thrones. There were lots of warm, earthy tones, mostly brown and black, and lots of breakdown. I don't know if there was a need for Geralt to have new armor. This is honestly one of those subjective things. I'm not a fan of the molded boiled leather look. It's done so often now in fantasy, and the studs are just trim here. I actually prefer Eskel's Brigandine. At least the studs, which hold in place metal plates underneath, are useful. And I thought the elves' costumes were pretty good as well. They went into another direction with their costumes in season 2, but I didn't mind it so much because they had a pretty big story arc and the introduction of a new major character. There was some leather scale mail, which if any of you know me irks the heck out of me because like most leather armor, it provides little protection. But, again, fantasy. Yennefer is in a rope dress for a big chunk of season 2. Back in Aruza, she dons this off-the-shoulder gown that looks like it should be on a runway or an ad for Chanel No. 5, and it looks completely out of place in the show. While her second costume, the one that she wears largely for the second half of the season, looks more in place with her other wardrobe. It's black. For me, it's just okay, since she typically is the fashion icon on the show. The gold appliques on the front of the bodice and the cuff, they look like they kind of clash with the embroidery on the skirt of the overgown. And like some of the looks in the show, there appears to be a lot of store-bought embroidered fabric, probably from Top Fabrica Soho in London. And finally, we get to Cirilla. I liked all of her costumes. Her gowns were beautiful and befitting a princess, the white and silver showing her innocence, and again, matching the medieval fantasy setting of The Witcher. And her training gear was decent aside from the metal grommets on her bodice. There was a bit of blue in there, a callback to her Alice in Wonderland-like costume from season 1. And if I have a quibble, it's that she doesn't dress for the weather. Sure, she wears that lovely fur stole at times, but other than that, no gloves or a head covering, any additional warmth. And while riding on horseback with Geralt, a traveling cloak would have worked nicely here, a la Sansa Stark. And in her training, she wears the same outfit outdoors as in. So don't get me wrong, I'll sometimes forego wearing a coat to put the garbage out in sub-zero weather, but that is just for a minute. Even if you are working out and training, you can still get frostbite because while she is an elder blood carrier, she is still also human. So overall, I thought it was a pretty decent design, and while it likely won't win any trophies come award season, it earned a 6th place position in my top 10 best fantasy costumes for 2021. I look forward to the next season. Hopefully we won't have to wait as long. Let me know in the comments section what you thought of the costumes in season 2. If you find value in my content, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next video.